Hello, I'm football commentator Derek Ray, and you're listening to the Foot Weekly podcast.
Hello, and welcome to week 7 of the Foot Weekly podcast. This is a gameplay episode. And yes, having missed the supporter content pod, I've risen from the dead to be here for this gameplay episode, which, you'll have to bear with me, maybe slightly sniffly, but certainly looking forward to talking about gameplay. And with me, we have, as you'd expect, Josh Excels. Hello, Josh.
Yes, good to be here. Good to have you back for this one. You know, injuries are never fun, and we don't have a very deep bench, so we just played without a player for the previous podcast.
yeah, and still, sometimes playing with one man less can actually lead to a strong performance, and that's exactly what happened on this week's content episode. Do catch it if you haven't already, the supporter episode this week, and I have with me, continuing from that episode, TaZz from The Guide. Welcome back, TaZz. Good to have you.
Thanks for having me. Now back to my major strength, I would say.
yeah. No, we've had you do a bit of content stuff for us, which has been fun. I think it's a nice thing to have a bit of a different perspective on the content side. But yeah, back to gameplay proper. And, I guess we're actually going to start off with some kind of bigger topics for debate, and then we'll move on to kind of gameplay tips. Because one thing we saw was EA actually fairly quickly, reverting one of the changes they made in that major gameplay patch they did. And it's something that actually I think has been, I can't think that anyone has been negative about the fact that they've reverted this change. And it is that R1/RB dribbling, what would you call it? I guess it is basically... Yeah, they've corrected it so that it's not fixed, it's reverted it so that it is the same as it was back before that patch. And I think that, from the perspective of someone who I know, TaZz, you said, was positive about the fact that they were making that jockey change. Were you surprised to see, because we didn't hear from you at the time, were you surprised to see that R1/RB dribbling nerf when it came? And are you welcoming the fact that it's back?
Yeah, this nerf for controlled sprint came out of nowhere, I would say. I didn't notice anyone really complaining about this. And if you look at the big picture, and when it was introduced, I felt like back then controlled sprint was very good, but people got adjusted to it. Last year in 25, it was not so powerful, and I felt like they were moving it in the right direction this year at the beginning of the season, that it was good, but it was not totally overpowered. And then for whatever reason, they nerfed it. And now it's great that they come to the conclusion to bring it back, and they're really acting fast on those kind of things. But why nerf it at the first place? And I feel like it was not really thought through. If after 2 weeks, they come to the conclusion, yeah, let's bring it more or less back to what it was before. And this feels for me a bit random overall. Maybe that was just a showcase. Hey, we're acting really, really fast this year when it comes to those kind of things. We are listening.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, it's rare. I mean, I don't think I can particularly remember them reverting anything of this kind of sort of magnitude this quickly before, Josh. So I guess from that perspective, it is quite nice to see a kind of aggressive approach to making changes to the game.
Yeah. Aggressive is probably the right word, and I think maybe the initial patch was just too aggressive. I think that was maybe the problem with it, that it wasn't that they just slightly reduced it. They significantly reduced the effectiveness of R1 dribbling, and it just felt unnecessary with the kind of improvement to Jockey, especially with the way that the game was trending more towards this AI defending 8 men behind the ball, 9 men behind the ball, and, as much as technical dribbling is good, it was one of the only things that you had to really combat the AI defending that had become so prevalent. One of the things I found interesting was in the interview that they gave, they said that the technical dribbling was something they wanted to fix from release. It wasn't they got feedback about it. Before the game was released, they thought R1 dribbling was overpowered, and so that's why it was reduced in the first proper gameplay patch. And it's that's great, but if you've seen nobody talk about it, no one saying it's too overpowered, no real feedback saying that there's an issue, why was it changed? It's that kind of, I'm glad that they've reverted it. it is back to being much better now, especially if you've got the playstyle plus. But yeah, it was an odd one. The speed with which they brought it back is brilliant. We'll see with maybe potential future changes if the speed of bringing things back is quite as quick, because I don't know, there's some things that seem like they're maybe on the chopping block that will, I think, fundamentally change how people feel about the game in some respects.
Was that a nod towards the goalkeeper movement patch, perhaps?
Maybe.
I was going to say goalkeeper movement patch. We don't know that they're even going to do anything about it at this point. But there was a poll that they released on Discord saying, we've been receiving a lot of feedback on goalkeeper movement. What do you think about it? The poll has now closed. It got 15,078 votes. The split of votes was 14%. I strongly like it. 14%. I like it. 11%. I'm indifferent. 12%. I dislike it. And then 50%. I strongly dislike it. So quite a clear winner for strongly dislike it. And actually, I guess if you discount that I'm indifferent, you've got a 62% for disliking it, essentially, and then a 28% for liking it. So yeah, that's pretty definitive in terms of what people, at least in the EA FC Discord, think about goalkeeper movement. I think maybe before we talk about our thoughts on goalkeeper movement, maybe we could talk about the approach that EA are taking around these sorts of things by, putting out a poll. Because we got a question, funny enough, this week. I guess it may have been connected to this, from Hendy83 saying, my question would be, it's more to do with community feedback relating to gameplay. Do you feel EA are listening to the community too much as opposed to backing their own game? It's like irony in, sort of providing feedback saying you're listening to feedback too much, which I think is, actually a totally valid thing to say, because the majority aren't always correct, to be honest. People don't always know what they want, right? I think that's very important to remember. But yeah, like, how have you been feeling about their approach, TaZz, to taking feedback on board, to putting out the poll? Like, would you be like, I don't think they're actually working in the best interest of the game if they move forward with with a patch based on a poll that they put out on Discord?
It's a very complex topic, I would say. I feel like it's a good approach to ask the community about certain things, how they feel about it. So, for example, you bring out a patch and ask, do you like the change? I think that's great, because on the one side, it won't show necessarily in the stats or like the data that they have if the change, how it's received from the users. So just get this kind of straight feedback from the users, how they feel about it. I think this is a good angle. But when it comes to designing the game and making decisions like what kind of features should be changed or removed, I feel like you can listen to this to some extent to get also an idea how the community feels about this, but this should not be, at least from my perspective, the final call or like the final decision. If we actually like change this from a design perspective as the persons or like as the team who's designing the game. Because the problem now is we have this kind of poll out. It's very shifted in one direction, and there's a clear tendency. So like now there's a certain pressure for EA to do something about this. And now all of a sudden it gets out of hand in a way who's designing the game. Because now the community expects, like it was a one-sided poll, now they have to change or like they have to remove. Maybe the problem is also like how this is like phrased, the kind of question, and what kind of perspective or like what kind of expectations comes out of this from the community, because the community thinks now, goalkeeper movement is going to get removed. But maybe this is not the origin of this question. Maybe it was more like, is it just too strong and we should nerf it a bit? And now they might not actually do what the community expects based on this poll. So I don't like this kind of direction, and I've like that it's when it comes to those kind of design questions in a way. And I would also make the case that, for example, if you would ask the community about player log, what would you think when the community gets asked about player log, if this is something that should get removed? Yes, the majority, I feel like, would say that this should get removed. But I think this is like, obviously just my personal perspective on this. This is a great tool to like get something which you can master, and if you're really good at this, you can like just perform better. You can do something better on the pitch, and I don't feel like this is the right approach to just ask the majority if certain features should be in the game or not. But my perspective on this,
it's a really good point. I think there are other games that almost go entirely by polling, right? There's actually like games out there where for a change to happen in the game, it has to be polled and it has to pass with a certain margin for that change to happen. And I think most of those games probably aren't as competitive as 𝘖𝘂 is. And that is where I think there could be an issue with taking this approach, because I think player lock's a good example. There's a lot of people out there who know they'll get an advantage if player lock is removed because they don't use player lock, and player lock is an advantageous skill-based, I think, advantage that some people have. And yet the vast majority don't use it. And you can tell because I use player lock sometimes, not loads. And if I use it early in a game in an environment where quitting is maybe more common, often someone will just quit because they're like, this guy's really good, I'm not going to bother, even though they may well have beaten me. But I think that does demonstrate that it's something that people identify as a high skilled thing. They don't, and they may just be like, actually, let's get rid of this because I've never learned it. I don't want to learn it. So I think that's a really important point to remember. And I also think your point about actually there might be ways of polling which are a bit better than this. And I think one of the ways they could start polling, which I think would be better, is to be like thinking, okay, we're thinking we might make this change, and it's, let's say, to reduce, which is probably what they're thinking, is reduce the effectiveness of goalkeeper movement by, let's say, only allowing the goalkeeper to take a small step to the direction that you send them, and that's it. Like, you're basically just saying, I want you to prefer that side as the goalkeeper. Like, you know, I'm not able to move the goalkeeper loads. Obviously, on free kicks and set pieces, all that kind of stuff is different. But like, I want you to make a small movement to the side just to help you. And that might be what they plan. But if they were to poll about that, to say, you know, we're thinking about making this change, what do you think of this? Then that's probably something which would work better than sort of making this more broad question to the community, which, as you say, people are then going to think like, okay, well, you should get rid of it then because that's what people want. So I think that is like, yeah, it is a kind of slightly dangerous approach in a weird way. But yeah, Josh, what do you think about this?
So, firstly, my position on goalkeeper movement has always been that I don't think it should be in the game. At least not in the way that it currently works. I don't mind, obviously, I still want you to be able to charge your goalkeeper, right? You should still be able to bring the goalkeeper out. But the unrealistic nature of like the double tap triangle that makes your goalkeeper take 5 steps over to one side of the goal, there is obviously a level of realism that we want to strive for, and then a level of realism that's maybe unnecessary, or where it is a video game, you can stretch those boundaries. And I think a keeper taking 5 steps across his goal to save a shot, it just doesn't feel right for me. My problem with keeper movement isn't even necessarily keeper movement. I think it's 2-part. I think it's visual. I think the fact that they move, instead of it being like I want you to dive in this direction regardless of where the shot goes, I would be fine with that. That would then be a skill thing. It would look fine because the keeper would be diving potentially the right way. They might dive the wrong way, as keepers do in real life. But I think that that would be fine from a visual perspective. But I think that the second problem for me is how effective it is. It feels like if you move the goalkeeper in the right direction, and this is why I don't think it's about just one step. If you move the goalkeeper in the right direction by just one step right now, the chance of saving that, it goes from like 30% to like 95%. And for me, it's just dumb. And with how quickly you now have to react, with how many people are packed in the box, with them trying to push precision shooting as the skill gap because they've removed time finishing, the answer of, well, just shoot the other side. Just notice they've moved the keeper and shoot the other side. I'm sorry, by the time I've noticed, cancelled my shot, done a fake shot, done whatever I need to do to move it to the other side, I've been tackled because the AI is too strong. So it's like, for me, it's one of those things that's just unnecessary. I don't think the answer is remove it. And I don't think that, but I think that is what will end up happening. I would prefer that we have a tournament or some form, like the next gauntlet, they just say keeper movement is disabled for this gauntlet. Let us see what the game feels like without keeper movement. Let us see what it's like. Does it give rise to, if you hit a shot from this position in this direction, it goes in every time, regardless of who the keeper is and who the shooter is? Because if people then get that feeling of, well, I don't like not having keeper movement because if I get to this point, I'm definitely giving up a goal, then maybe there's then you've seen both sides of it. Right now, we don't really have experience of keeper movement not being in the game. I will say I'm not someone who uses keeper movement, and it's I can do it. There are some games where I'm like, oh, I'm going to move my keeper now, and if I make a save, it's like, hey, I've made a save. I don't like it. I don't like it as a mechanic. I would sooner learn to defend properly and not allow the shot that I'm needing to move my keeper for. And I think that's another part of my issue with this is that people talk about it being a skill gap. No, the skill gap should be you stopping somebody getting to that shooting point in the first place. Not, oh, I just need to press one button to one side and I've undone all of that work you've done to break down my 8 AI defenders. For me, it just feels like an extra level that doesn't need to be there. In terms of how they're going about it, doing a poll, I think it's good to get an idea from people of, do they like it? Do they not like it? I agree that it needs to be a little bit more precise in how they ask the question. They need to almost say, we're thinking about reducing it, as you say. And so it's not like but I can think they're kind of damned if they do, damned if they don't. I think it's the right question to ask. I think the responses were interesting. I'm more pissed off with the 14% of people who sat on the fence in the response than I am with the 14% who said that they love it. Because if you use it all the time and it's good for you, I completely get why you would say, I want this. What I don't like is the perspective that because you don't use it, you're not allowed to say you don't want it. Yeah, absolutely it would benefit me, but it benefits the people that use it if it stays in the game. So both sides have a vested interest in whether it should be in the game. But I think there are more people on the side of, I use it, but I don't want it to be in the game, than there are of, I don't use it, but I want it to be in the game. So for me, that says it's something that needs to be at least patched down, at least reduced a little bit, because it's just too powerful right now, and it's an unrewarding gameplay experience. I want to zoom out. I know I've been going for a while, but I want to zoom out to a slightly wider point here about player locks. You brought up player locks. And I agree. I would be on the side of, yeah, leave it in the game. I don't mind player locks. If someone's player locking, they've got more fingers than I do. That's absolutely fine, right? And I've tried to learn it. It's just not something my brain can process that quickly. I'm old, right? And so I can't get on board with it. But I understand it being in the game. But the game, by EA's own admission, the number of people playing the game, or the number of people playing games in general, is the age is increasing. The average age of people playing games is increasing. Younger people aren't picking up games, and I think it's things like keeper movement, skill cancelling, all these like pro tactics for separating people at the very top level of the game that have trickled down now into the general player base. That means casuals just don't bother playing the game anymore because it's too complicated. The skill isn't in passing it in the right direction, because the game will pass it 45 degrees differently to get it round a defender if you double tap triangle. Like, these things are just, it's too, I retweeted a video that AI9 Skills put out saying that, like, gaming in general has gone way, way too far towards competitive scenes and pro scenes, and it's forgot that they're supposed to be fun at the end of the day. And I think that's why we are where we are right now. I'm not saying I don't think pros should be talked to. I'm not even saying I don't think these kind of tactics or these kind of mechanisms shouldn't be in the game. I think some of them should be, but I think we've lost the essence of what the game is, and I think it's almost too complicated because there's this desire to add new things into the game every year rather than just perfect the things that are already in there.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like you've made like 3 points there, so we'll have to.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, they were good points, but and I think like particularly the point, to go back to the actual goalkeeper movement stuff, your point about why you think it probably should be removed, or at least, I guess not removed necessarily, but there should be changes made to it, is one that maybe we'll let TaZz come back on, because I think his perspective is a little bit different. But before that, we'll take a break, a little cliffhanger, and we'll find out what TaZz thinks right after this break. Hello, and in this break, a quick reminder that the pod is made possible by supporters. The pod didn't used to be weekly. Yes, Foot Weekly wasn't actually weekly for a time. And then someone suggested setting up the Patreon. And since then, the pod has been weekly. And in fact, it's been twice weekly because there is that supporter episode every single week. So if you'd like to catch that episode and keep the podcast going, it's just £3 a month to do so. And you get loads in return. And there are perks higher than that, including access to the Discord too. So if you're interested and would like to support the podcast, then head over and search Support for Weekly. Go to Patreon and it's very easy to sign up. If you are a supporter keeping the podcast going, then a huge thank you for doing so. And if you do consider supporting, a huge thank you too. Right, let's jump back into the pod. Hello, welcome back after the break. So, as promised, let's hear TaZz's thoughts on goalkeeper movement. Where do you stand on it? Do you use it? I guess an important question. And does it win you games?
It does. But also, on the other hand, I think this is, at least from my perspective, important. Most often I benefit from this because on the one side, I think I'm doing a good job. I will talk just about this also in a bit about using it on my side. So I think I benefit from this, that I might do saves that I won't do anyways, or like other way if I don't use it. And on the other side, you can outplay this, obviously. You don't have to shot fake or shot cancel to just outplay this, but just expect that the opponent's going to move it and just have a read for the situation. So I think there are easy ways to deal with goalkeeper movement. And this is something that I will just start with. It's already nerfed. Like I'm going to be really curious how they're going to tune it down even further, because when you compare goalkeeper movement from like 1 or 2 years ago, I think 2 years ago, they reduced it already quite severely, that right now it's a very, very risky mechanic to use in a way that as soon as you commit, most often you don't have a chance to saving those at all. So for example, when the opponent gets into the box and I start the goalkeeper movement too early, they will have a very easy time because the goalkeeper is just standing there on the spot and this doesn't react anymore to any further input. So this is something which comes at a severe cost, I would say, using this kind of mechanic, because you open up not necessarily just the side that you just moved to, but also then just to react what is going to happen in the next 1 or 2 seconds as the person using goalkeeper movement, and also how much you can actually move the goalkeeper. Like I would say like 2 or 3 years ago, it was a very stupid mechanic what you can do. There were people actually pulling the goalkeeper more inside the goal because this increased the distance to the shooter, gave the goalkeeper more reaction time, and the goalkeeper was able to pull off saves which were completely unrealistic. Right now, I feel like it's more balanced. Maybe I'm very curious what they're going to do about this. Maybe they find a way to fine-tune it even more, like tune it down a bit. But the big nerf or change was already happening or like happened in the past. And therefore, I feel like right now, actually, I would say it's in a good state. Now coming to why I think I like it as a mechanic. And obviously, we will have a little bit of discrepancy between if it's realistic or not. Like obviously we don't see anything like this in real life football, how the goalkeeper positions themselves in order to make a guess where the opponent is going to shoot. So as soon as you're able to live with that, I feel like goalkeeper movement is just the extension of what FIFA or FC is all about, at least from my perspective, and it's decision making. When it comes to evaluating the options that they are on the pitch, how you distribute the ball, how you're going to turn, like this is just FC in an essence, how you play this. You will always it's like very fast-paced chess that you evaluate the options on the on the pitch, and you make your decision like what is the best one, what might also the opponent do, how do I follow up with this? So like you're basically maximizing your chance of success. And this goes starting with your defensive line, moving up through the midfield towards the attack. And for me, the goalkeeper is the last part of this. And there it also comes down to what is the current decision. I think about as soon as the opponent gets inside the box, gets into a shooting position, what is the strong foot of the player that the opponent is using? What kind of play styles do they have? So what is the most likely finish they will do? And then there's also a little bit of a metagaming coming into this in terms of most of opponents will shoot here in this case into the far post. That's why I'm going to move far post. Or there's a trend like a lot of players now understand most players will use the goalkeeper to the far post, so that's why I'm using to the near post. Like, this is all coming together, and this goalkeeper movement is, for me, I don't know, the logical consequence about how I play the game. And this is like the last part or the last piece of how can I increase my chances of success in comparison to the opponent, just doing something better. And I feel like this isn't talked about enough. And also, like, maybe the last point that I want to make, and I think I really like the idea of, if they have the chance to implement this into just a game mode, to give it a try. Because I think what is completely ignored when it comes to this whole discussion is, right now shooting is balanced towards a game that we play with goalkeeper movement in place. If we are going to remove it or tune it down, we will have, just by how the shooting is balanced, so many more goals. And it will be so easy to finish. So what will be the consequence of that? Most likely, they will have to tune down shooting in a bit. So the consequence of this is, I feel like we will have more inconsistent finishing or shooting, which is something which I would be very afraid of, that this is going to get introduced in the game. I feel like this is something which would be followed up by this, because I don't think they can nerf goalkeeper movement and leave shooting untouched. At least this is how I see it, how this is going to develop. And I don't like this kind of perspective when shooting, because right now shooting is very consistent in a way of finishing if you make the right decisions. And if they're going to introduce just some variance to it, because otherwise you will score too many goals, well, I'm not a big fan of this, I have to say.
Yeah, what I find kind of interesting is, a lot of people have complained about the effectiveness of the low-driven playstyle, right, this cycle. And I feel like, at the moment, the only way people are saving low-driven shots is goalkeeper movement, essentially. Like, if I take a shot and the person with low-driven and the opponent hasn't moved their keeper, and my player has like low-driven base playstyle or the plus, it's going in guaranteed. And even from like a fair distance out. So I think you're right that it's kind of interesting if they do nerf goalkeeper movement, it could make shooting like almost automatic, especially if you're using precision shooting. Like, I'm trying to think, like, I think in a lot of games that I'm playing, the only time the keeper's saving it is if my opponent moves the keeper, basically. Like, that's the only time. Josh is shaking his head, so maybe he doesn't agree. You think saves are happening without moving the keeper?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah.
No.
If they have playstyles,
like if you're only taking shots where you think you're going to score, then yeah, of course you are going to like swerve more to the keeper's not making a save unless they move their keeper. But like, I think, well, I mean, the games that I play, I'm very often not scoring chances or not scoring a shot. Well, not very often, but like, I don't think it would be fair to say saves are only made when the keeper's moved. I don't think that's the case, personally.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it feels like the saves my goalkeepers I'm playing against are making are maybe 80-90% of the time it's because they've moved the keeper.
Does that not tell you that the whole system's broken then?
Yeah, potentially, actually.
If you have to move the keeper from the position that they should be stood in order to save a shot, the whole game's got what's the point in the game?
Yeah, I mean, there's a general like point here which I think was originally raised when they actually added the ability to control the keeper into Ultimate Team. I don't know if the very brief period that was. Do you guys remember that? There was a brief period, I can't remember which game it was now, where you could actually switch to your goalkeeper and control them. And maybe it was just in the beta and then it never actually came out in the real game. But it was something that like was extremely unpopular. Basically, everyone complained about it, and they removed it pretty quickly. And yeah, maybe it wasn't the beta, but whether the goalkeeper should actually be something that you have influence over, and whether actually, because I think there's a lot of people out there who are like, no, I don't want the goalkeeper to actually be a factor almost. And unless I'm taking an awful shot, the goalkeeper shouldn't actually save it. And it's more about the build up versus the defending, rather than the goalkeeper being that much of an influence in the outcome of matches. But yeah, I don't know, that I feel like that is a bit weird, and that the goalkeeper should still play a role. But I think from my perspective, I actually use goalkeeper movement, but I can't say that I'm like particularly like amazing at it, or it's something that I'm like really, really good at relative to maybe the other people who are very good at it. But I do certainly win games against people who aren't used to goalkeeper movement. And I think against like stronger opponents, I will, as in stronger opponents who are better at moving the keeper, I will sometimes lose games against those people. But it's never like frustrated me massively because I am aware that I can beat those goalkeeper movement players. I just have not fully kind of, I don't know, like switched on enough in those moments to like put it the other side of the goalkeeper movement. Like I get that for a lot of people it is frustrating, but I think the people that it's most frustrating for, interestingly, is people who play a mix of players who move the keeper and don't move the keeper. Because I find that too. Like I'll be like, oh, like, you know, I can just, you know, like I'm often playing someone who doesn't move the keeper, but I'm anticipating them moving the keeper. And so then I like put the shot in a place where I just assume it will go in because they're going to move the keeper to the far post or whatever, and they don't, and then they save it. And then I'm like, for the rest of the game, I know they're not going to move the keeper, so I score like every shot, which is kind of a weird thing. Like it means you have to kind of be like, are they going to move? Like early on in the game, you need to assess, are they going to move the keeper? And so how am I going to approach this game? So it does feel like a kind of different dynamic. But yeah, I have kind of mixed feelings on it. Basically, I think it's a good. I think the base as a baseline, it's a good mechanic. Like the idea that you can have some influence over your goalkeeper, and you can, and if your opponent's taking the same shot all the time, that you can be like, I know you're going to do that, so I'm going to tell my keeper to be anticipating that shot. That makes a lot of sense because otherwise, and also in terms of exploitable shooting mechanics, it allows there to be some kind of counter to that. So like with like long range finesse shots, for example, those sorts of things, like it allows us to have something that you could use to stop those things. But whether it's something that should, as you said earlier, Josh, basically almost guarantee, I mean, it does basically guarantee that if you shoot the side the goalkeeper's moved to, the keeper's going to save it. And I think that is a bit extreme. So maybe there just needs to be some kind of balancing of it. I think you'd still need the goalkeeper to sort of make a movement to one side so you can tell that the opponent's done that and react to it, or some kind of indicator that they're actually moving. But
I disagree. Because I think we're coming at this from the perspective of experienced players who play the game a lot. I want you to think about someone who's maybe not played the game in a few years, and they go into their first online game, and every time they go to take a shot, the keeper is stepping in the direction that they would obviously shoot in. They're going to go, what the hell is this game? Like, so I don't think you need to be told your opponent's moving the keeper. It would be a lot less frustrating. Like, you're not told if your opponent's using precision shooting. So when they score a shot that you don't think should go in, would that make it better if it was like, oh, it's on precision shooting? Would that annoy you more if you told it wasn't precision shooting? Just don't.
I feel like in real football, a goalkeeper might take a step to one side, right, to anticipate you shooting across them, right?
No,
like they'll see someone shooting, like maybe it's more from
keepers
distance.
Should never be beaten at a near post. Like that's. I
mean, that's not true, though, is it? Every goalkeeper who's ever been on Match of the Day is like, well, that's a bit of a myth.
It's a bit of a myth, but if you're beaten at the near post, it tends to be considered the goalkeeper's fault because they're guessing. It's like with free kick. If they take 2 steps over to the side they've left open, they say you shouldn't have taken that risk because your job is to protect this side, and you're not going to get one if they get it over the wall into the far side.
So to be clear, you're saying you do think there should be something in the game which like tells your keeper this person's probably going to shoot across you. So anticipate that. Yeah, you're saying that would be fine.
Dive in this direction because then that allows you to build in a proper skill gap with precision shooting. Where on normal shooting, you know maybe your chances if you just like hold to the corner flag on one side, your chances of scoring that goal are 20%, 30%. But on precision shooting, if you aim it in the right portion of the goal, it's 50%, 60%. Now we're introducing an actual skill gap that looks more like proper football, that still rewards you for guessing that your opponent's going to shoot a certain direction. It stops every shot being a certain goal unless you're incredibly skilled at shooting. But why do we want to reduce people being skilled at shooting by, like, I don't know. It doesn't feel like every shot should be a penalty, which is essentially what this is right now. Which is if your opponent guesses the right way and you shoot either the right side or the wrong side, then it's a goal or it's not a goal. That's just an unrewarding game.
There is a bit of a difference though, isn't there? Because you can actually anticipate. You can see the goalkeeper move and then shoot the other way. The way it works currently, which isn't obviously what happens with penalties. And I do think that's something that would then make it harder almost because you can't tell where the goalkeeper's gone. So because at the moment, if someone moves a keeper even a second too early, I can put it on the other side. Whereas what you're suggesting, you basically be in a situation where you are completely guessing which way they've anticipated rather than being able to read it.
But very often the chances of I can just put it in the other side happen when you've got lots of space and time anyway, when one-on-ones should be easy to score. But the ones where it is most frustrating is snapshots inside the box, where you have to shoot in this touch, otherwise you're going to lose the ball, or you'd have to turn around and try and create a completely different angle, where that's when it becomes something that is too powerful for me. Like one-on-ones, yeah, guess either side, fine. If you guess early, whatever. I think that the idea though that just because you've seen them move, that now negates the fact that it's overpowered. For me, I don't agree with that. And I think for high level players, I get it. It's just get better, react quicker, fine. But the game isn't only about high level players. There is a reason the player base is dwindling, and it's because casual players aren't playing this game. And these kind of mechanics are part of the reason why people aren't playing this game. In my opinion, is part of the reason why people aren't playing this game.
What are your thoughts, TaZz, on that?
By the way, I don't disagree with TaZ's point, and I don't disagree with people that want keeper movement in there. I definitely think there is a place for these kinds of mechanics. I just don't think I don't think the answer is binary. I don't think it should be in the game or it shouldn't be in the game. I think there's a version of it.
You're not saying
works.
It should be removed.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, I'm in agreement that I think it could be toned down, and it feels kind of weird in its current state. Like, I agree with that. I just think that it is a valuable mechanic to have in the game, and I think actually there's been a lot of like OP shooting mechanics which have been avoidable because of goalkeeper movement. And I think that regardless of whatever happens, actually still having it something you can do when the ball's outside of the box is something that, I think they should, whatever they do, I feel like goalkeeper movement should be possible when the ball's outside of the box. So that would be for free kicks, for corners, obviously, and for long range shooting, because I don't trust the game not to have exploitable mechanics from distance. So I think that's an important thing to say. But how things work in kind of that 1v1 situation, or just shooting from in and around the box, that is something that I think that there could be some changes to make it a bit more, a bit more realistic and maybe a bit less binary. Because I also think it's made worse by shooting the cycle, where I feel, at least personally, on precision, I am sort of guaranteed to score if the opponent, ends up moving the keeper to one side. Like, it's a guaranteed goal. And also, if they don't move the keeper, I feel like it's basically a guaranteed goal in a lot of situations. So it does feel extra frustrating when it's saved, considering otherwise it would be guaranteed. But it's interesting. I don't know, TaZz, if you have any final thoughts on the sort of issue around maybe people being put off by more complex mechanics in the game, because ultimately, like, a lot of successful games are actually successful because they have skill-based mechanics that people find rewarding to use, and are a big part of that, like, culture around the game.
It's very hard to assess or evaluate, I feel like, how it's really like for the casual player, because when it comes, for example, to goalkeeper movement, this is a mechanic which I think Josh already mentioned it trickled down. If you like, I'm already actually surprised when I don't know, during a certain cycle of the season, I play against the more casual or average player base, how many players actually started using goalkeeper movement. But on the other side, you can tell that they try to use it, but they're not using it as good. So I don't know if this is actually like as not appealing enough or like too complicated for casual players, that this is not something that they can understand. Okay, I have to learn this to use it in a proper way. Obviously, this is part of my whole identity, how I approach this game, but also other games that I play, that I feel like it's always something really cool in the aspect of me engaging towards the game or with the game, that there's something that I can learn and master. This is how I do everything when it comes to like picking up a game or a skill, that I always have this. I just not play the game. I understand maybe this is different to some part of the player base who just want to relax and don't have some sort of motivation to become better at it. But most often when I do something, when it comes to playing games, for example, I want to be good at this. And if I notice that there's something which I can actually pick up and get better, and there's so many dimensions, so many facets or things that we can, like as a player, can do better. And this is just another thing that I can if I want to engage with and get better at it, I have also my moments of success. I will have moments of failure. And I feel like this is a fair approach. But maybe there's a whole point to introducing too complicated mechanics, and therefore players will not just play the game because they think it's just overall too complicated. To be honest, I'm missing the experience in really assessing this in a good way.
Yeah, it's an interesting debate. It's something that I think, is at the core of a lot of FC or FIFA's struggles over the years, is like that, what's the word, kind of contrast between approaches to the game. There's that kind of, it's the same in a lot of games, right? There's that competitive side of things, but there's also the more casual player base, which is, the vast majority that ultimately want to have some skill definition, because otherwise they can't beat the players who are worse than them, and that would be frustrating. But they also, will obviously maybe not want to see some of the more like gamified mechanics in the game, and maybe want those removed. So it's something that will be interesting as we see more feedback around FC in terms of gameplay and how EA kind of manages that. Certainly in terms of like the hardcore competitive scene, as in like the actual pro scene, it's obvious that that's become less of a priority for EA, and it feels like a lot of the changes they're making are actually not considering that, to be honest, in their thinking, which is quite interesting. But obviously they do still need that skill definition, because otherwise, the game kind of doesn't work. So it'll be interesting to see where things go.
I would also say, I think this would be way less of an issue if the AI defending wasn't as strong as it is.
People would be less frustrated.
Yeah, I don't think those mid-level skill players would be as frustrated if it didn't feel like breaking somebody down was a massive thing that you had to try and do, especially when they get set in that defense. So I do think that there's maybe I think with a lot of things, it's where do you apply the fix to the things that are broken? Like needing keeper movement to stop overpowered shots from outside the box. It's like, do we stop the overpowered shots from outside the box, or leave a mechanic in there to allow you to save it? It's kind of like, where do you decide to put that? So yeah, I get that there's not like a one answer that will suit everybody, which is why I think somewhere in the middle of what we have now and no keeper movement is where I'd like to see it end up. But yeah.
Sure, that makes sense. I think we should move on to providing some specific gameplay tips. And so we will do that right after this break. Hello, welcome back after the break. So I was going to say, actually, if anyone has any thoughts on goalkeeper movement, really anything around the game, then do send those in. I'm sure we'll talk about this again. You can do that all the usual ways at @FootWeeklyPod on Twitter/X. You can send anything in via the supporter Discord for gold or icon supporters in the pod priority questions channel. You can also email footweekly@mail.com. Right. Oh, and also you can, of course, comment on the podcast on YouTube. And yeah, let's move on to some gameplay tip related questions. We'll start off on one which is defensive related, but I do want to move on to attacking because it feels like we haven't spoken about that as much this cycle. So Kiora says, this gameplay question is based on how defenders move. I struggle to figure out how to anticipate the new jockey speeds. I can't stop my defenders from straying too far from the position I want them to hit, leading to easy chances. Never been something I faced before. Any gameplay tips or ways to improve would be welcome. So yeah, I think that's because of the gameplay patch that changed jockey speed. Obviously, that is something that does naturally affect your kind of timings and the way you anticipate things. Now the jockey speed is a bit faster. TaZz, the particular kind of tips that you might give people on how to kind of more accurately jockey and take up the right positions?
I always think this is a very interesting topic because we also get asked about this very often, about when do you jockey, when do you use fast jockey, where do you position exactly, etc. And when do you not use jockey at all? And I always struggle a bit answering this, because if you would ask me, like, how much do you use jockey, how much do you fast jockey? I don't know. Like, it's a very it's a very intuitive topic for me, and I do this very unconsciously how I use this. And I think on the one side, it's already very good for 𝘬𝘃𝗲 that they notice that this is a problem And now the question is like they're conscious about this, how that this is something, and now is how to reflect on this and how to get into this cycle of improvement. And one way how to get to this kind of conscious, unconscious way of doing this in a better way would be practicing, or like finding the right practice environment, so you get a little bit of feedback and see like what is working, what is not working. And something what we also advise in this whole kind of approach to get better at the game is finding those kind of practice environments. And something when it comes to positioning and also using Jockey, fast Jockey, is going into certain skill games. So for example, the skill game Take and Clear is something where you can, like it's in the defending segment, where you can really focus on, or like you can use the scenario to focus on staying in front of the opponent, and then just use the tools that you have at hand and have this kind of target of staying in front of the opponent, not necessarily just, I don't know, play the skill game to get the highest score, but set your own targets and how you want to play the skill game in that moment or in that regard, and have this own kind of mission that you want. And in that case, stay in front of the opponent and using those tools. And I feel like if you really practice this, just have to be like a couple of minutes, like in front of, or like at the beginning of each session that you play, and get those kind of repetitions. And then I feel like how we learn the game is not always just like learn something consciously and say like, okay, you have to just press this button and then you will do better. But you really have to give yourself a chance to actually learning this, getting this into yourself, and do this more unconsciously, because it can be also a real burden on you if you start to try to do everything consciously and be very aware of when you press what button. But just go into those kind of practice situations, scenarios, and repeat this over and over again, and then you will have a more intuitive feeling about learning this. And maybe something that you can consider more often in those situations is, when it comes to proper positioning, is also like a little bit of a diagonal angle, moving back or like moving to the side. So you have this because when it comes to positioning, I think what is rather tricky, we tend to do very drastic motions, like either forward or backward. And then with the new jockey speeds, it might end up that we move too far away or like too close to the opponent, and then we are vulnerable to that. So maybe try to incorporate more those kind of diagonal movements in those moments, depending on where the opponent is moving, so you don't have this kind of very drastic movement in one direction. So this would be the combination that I would advise. Try to incorporate those kind of diagonal movements, but also go into those kind of practice scenarios and try to find a very intuitive approach to using this.
Yeah. And what about you, Josh? Any tips on the jockeying front?
I like mainly that it's okay to stand still at times. I think very often it feels like people feel like they have to be moving. Whereas actually sometimes just standing still is the most difficult thing to play against, because you know there's no momentum that you're trying to read, and you've not managed to bait somebody into doing something. You know, actually the biggest thing that I've had to learn this year is kind of patience defending at times. There are times when you can be quick, you can put pressure on. I feel especially out wide, if you can switch early to the defender, people aren't expecting that as much. But you know, when you're faced up one-on-one, it's so easy to end up just pressing that trigger and ended up like absolutely sailing past somebody. So yeah, it's okay to kind of stand still and try and mirror someone else's movements, but just like maybe 50% of their movements, so that if they do explode and they do try and run past you, then you can commit to that and you're not behind the play. But if they kind of are just faking to go one way, all of your momentum, like by the time you've reacted, all of your momentum isn't going in the wrong direction, and it's too late to come back. So like I found it a little bit more difficult with the speed of Jockey being a bit quicker. But I think it's more of like just going through a bit of an that was easy for me to say, more of an adjustment period than necessarily it like being kind of, it's something that's now you've got to change the way that you play. It's just about learning when to let go of sprint, or even just let go of the analog stick completely and just allow yourself to kind of be still.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I think, you know, the only thing I can kind of add on top of what's already been said is it is quite player dependent, right? Like some players you'll be using are just going to be faster at jockeying because they've got Jockey Plus. A lot of people don't know, but defensive awareness is a big factor in jockey speed. I think it's actually the only, or pretty much the only factor when you're actually jockeying. that affects the speed apart from Jockey and Jockey Plus. Obviously, when you're going in and out of that, you get some balance and agility going on. But when you're actually doing the Jockey, it is that. So players with high defensive awareness are going to feel better in the Jockey, and so you need to be ready for them to feel better and to see more responsiveness, and also obviously. Well, actually not obviously, but the other thing that I consider when I'm jockeying is, especially at this point when players only have maybe one playstyle plus, is like, am I using a player with intercept plus, or am I using a player with anticipate plus, or am I using a player with block plus, and actually maybe bruiser plus you could add in there, and as a result I maybe treat what I'm doing in the jockey slightly differently. Like I'm happy for kind of them to maybe think they can take a shot on if I'm using a player with block plus, right? Because I'm pretty sure my block plus player will block it. I'm kind of happy and may even slightly encouraged by opening up the lane them to play a pass when I'm using a player with jockey plus. And then with anticipate plus, I'm maybe looking to kind of get close to them to actually make the tackle. So I think the way that you jockey and the way you defend should be a bit, I wouldn't have necessarily said this before playstyles, right? But now I think there is very much a kind of need to be a bit more kind of player focused when you're making decisions. But I wouldn't completely change your defensive approach because of that, but it's just something you can sometimes gain an advantage from. And also it's worth, saying from an attacking sense, maybe also like keep that in mind when because you can see obviously the player your opponent's controlling, and you can then kind of make a decision over whether I might play a pass around them or not, because I often just kind of avoid passing close to jockey plus player, passing close to intercept plus players, for example, because they often will just win it. Right. Talking of attacking, I think we should move on to talking about attacking. And I guess, we've talked a lot about defending this cycle generally. But I know attacking is something that is, of course, very important and maybe a little harder to talk about because it can be quite personal. But I know, TaZz, you have recently released your guide for specifically attacking. Do you want to maybe mention where people can catch that, and then we'll maybe cover some tips around attacking?
Yeah, so like obviously I'm running the guide, so we have a YouTube channel, and then we also have more in-depth content, more structured at the Guide Plus. And there we have like structured courses, and as Ben already mentioned, like recently we published the How to Attack, but also the How to Defend course, where we explain like really the core fundamentals, the fundamental aspects about how to play 𝘵𝘂26 and how to adjust to 𝘵𝘂26. So if you're interested in that, check that out. We also have a promo running currently until Friday. It's building up on the Scream promo where you get a temporary boost. Hopefully this one sticks to you, so that's a more permanent boost on your skill in 𝘵𝘂26. So I would be happy if you check that out. It helps us also and supports us and keep going with that.
Yeah. And the link will be in the description of this podcast. And actually, if they're listening to this after Friday, I understand you'll probably be doing this again once the next Screen boosts come, right? So they
for the next boost, but also we will also sometimes run some other promos, so it's always worth checking that out.
Yeah, that's a good point. And actually, maybe we start with, what would you say is the kind of number one or most fundamental element of that guide that you think people should take note of? Like, is there one particular attacking fundamental that's maybe specific to 𝘵𝘂26 that's worth looking out for?
I feel like this year you get really rewarded for being decisive. This can be just how you play forward, but also how you make decisions up front, especially against players who tend to stick to their midfielders and not defend with their defenders. So this is a very prevalent defending style, which is a nuisance in my perspective. And the way how I like to play this out is go for very decisive actions around the box. Like it can be just a ball roll to reposition or get a different angle towards the goal to then directly shoot. I think what is just very important, don't hold back and be afraid and try to find this 100% opening, but just go with your guts. And also, as I said, like do one decisive action, just a driven pass to an opponent, just take this one touch, or like not a driven pass to the opponent. That doesn't make any sense. to a teammate, and then like make one decisive action, how you control the ball. I noticed I feel like ball rolls in front of AI defenders is also something very good to, as I said, get a different angle towards the goal to shoot. but very decisive actions. I feel like this is from the beginning of the pitch in your own half, but also up front, driven passes and stuff like this. You just have to punish if the opponent are too slow. And that's why, by the way, we already mentioned that when Josh also was talking about it, controlled sprint, R1, RB dribbling is so helpful also maybe punishing those opponents who defend like this, because with that kind of dribbling, we still have some decisiveness in opening and exploring open spaces that there might be, hopefully, but we don't overcommit as easily, that we push up the ball too much forward, so the AI defenders will just pick up the open ball. This is something where controlled sprint is also coming in very handy, that we, especially inside the box, if the opponent doesn't take control over the defenders in front of us, don't be afraid to just really go into the box with a controlled sprint and do something. Like, this is my learning. Do something decisively.
Makes sense. And I was going to say, like, do you have any? Actually, let me ask Josh. Actually, if you were going to give one attacking tip that you really think is, the thing that's helped you the most in FC26, what would that be?
So I'm gonna go with two. They're kind of linked to each other. First time shots are really powerful.
Oh yeah.
Especially, I want you to imagine like you're controlling the player at the bottom of the screen. You pass it to somebody at the top of the screen who's kind of arriving onto it and hit it into the far post. The curve that they get on it, the speed that the shot gets hit at, and because it's first time, usually opponents haven't had time to move their keeper. So you're hitting it against a keeper who stood in the middle of the net. They're really, really powerful. And effectively anything around the box, as long as the player doesn't have to do like more than like a 90-degree turn to hit the shot, it's going to be really like a very good shot. But in order to get to that position, one thing I've found is, especially if somebody's defending really deep and you're struggling to break them down, if you can hold the ball essentially on either side of the box for just a couple of seconds, let your midfield get set, let your attackers kind of get set, there is a pattern of play that you can play where you pass it back to the edge of the box and then first time pass it into a player in the box, that because you've moved the ball twice very quickly, your opponent feels like they have to switch on to the defender that's now defending the player who's received the ball in the box. And as TaZz said, if you're decisive with the first touch you take inside the box, like 50% of the time, you're going to get a really good shooting opportunity. Sometimes you'll be able to just shoot it first time because you'll play it to the inside forward coming in on the opposite side of the pitch. But sometimes if you keep going down the middle and feel like you're getting crowded out, hold the ball out wide for just a few seconds, and there will be a passing play that you can play to essentially play that first time pass into somebody in the box where you can then send a defender one way or the other and tend to have a pretty good shooting opportunity fairly quickly.
Yeah, I think that's really true. I think especially if you've got players like 𝗖𝗃𝗃 plus, 𝗖𝗃𝗃 or even base with high short passing, playing passes that sort of probe your opponent's defense can be really, really good for avoiding or kind of, opening up defenses that are quite AI controlled. And I think I think people get worried that there's going to be like an offside situation in those contexts, because sometimes that can happen, right? Where the defense has actually stepped up and your player is behind the defensive line. But I would say if you are concerned about that, just tapping RB just before you play the pass, which is the button to call a player short, can often just guarantee that player moves onside so you can play that pass. And I do think attacking movement is getting better as people have more roles, and plus, and also obviously higher attacking positioning stats. But triggering runs with RB and L1, I think is, that's kind of the basic first step of triggering player movement before you get to like directed runs and player lock. But I think even that will help players a lot if they're not using it already. So I'd really encourage people to try that. There are lots of things around dribbling I could probably talk about. I think that dribbling is still really strong, even though they've obviously made it easier to jockey against dribbling. And a really underrated thing, I know that evolution for 𝗏𝗃𝗃 was quite popular, the one that I think was the 𝗏𝗏𝗃 evolution, which like one of the best players to use was 𝗏𝗃𝗃. I'd already evolved him a bit actually, so like he's even better for me. And he has the Trickster Plus, which for those who don't know, increases strafe dribbling speed. And only the Trickster Plus does that. The Trickster base doesn't. And if you do have a Trickster Plus player, holding LB and moving side to side is really quite strong. Like you get quite a nice like clean movement in either direction, then you can kind of explode out of it. Kind of like, how people would do the speed boost, right? But it's not quite a speed boost because you're dribbling out of it rather than sprinting out of it. I think is really quite strong. And I mean, obviously that's quite a niche tip because not everyone has Trickster Plus players, but if you do, I'd definitely be doing that. I think this is a good question which leads on from this quite nicely. Neil was asking, any advice on how to get cutbacks to work this year? It feels like it's just a sea of defenders' legs a lot of the time, whereas in previous years they were my primary way of scoring for wide formations. TaZz, have you got any tips on that?
Yeah, like this, like very good on what just Josh also explained. So like one way from this kind of wing position, also like just a tip of going rather deep on the wing towards the goal line helps a lot to create this kind of pockets where when you recycle the ball through the central midfield, for example. And as you said, like 1-2 passes there, and you might be able to play inside the box. When it comes to just like try to go for a more direct approach from the wing position, my learning this year, I would say in comparison to the last years, usually my approach was like from the wing position, get inside the box and try to find this kind of player inside the box with a driven pass very early. Like I don't want to give the time to the defenders to get in front of the player. But in 26, I somewhat made the observation or like the learning that I do better off when I wait a bit, because then like right now it feels like either it's giving my attackers more time to get in a proper position or also give the defenders more time to screw up their position. It's very unintuitive that I feel like a lot of opponents will understand what's happening here and what you're trying to accomplish, that you're looking for this kind of driven pass across in front of the goalkeeper, and you play this pass, and then they really invest everything in preventing this from happening, and they might overreact a bit and try to cover this up too eagerly. And then if you just wait a bit longer, and I think this can be just like 1 second, roughly like this, and then if you play the driven pass, I feel like they tend to be successful and reach your target more often. And as an alternative, this is something that I'm experimenting right now and that we somewhat I wouldn't say discovered, but I feel like is something which we have an eye out in 26 right now are the low-driven crosses. So for this, you have to press L1 plus R1 or LB plus RB and double tap the crossing button. And this is a cross which I feel like gives you something early on when you explore the space on the wing, and you might have like a player in the center also moving up inside the box. And this is usually a situation where I'm missing the tool a bit to play such a pass, where this kind of pass can deliver you like a very, very unique way of how the ball gets delivered to your player. But also could be also something when you're really on the goal line and try to play it across. But this is something that I'm still experimenting with. When do I use the low-driven cross in those kind of spots? When do I use the driven pass? Because the driven pass obviously is much easier in terms of input and doesn't have as much curve, and it's a more straight approach, I would say. So most often you will get away in those spots with the driven pass. But the low-driven cross is something to have an eye out, because I feel like if you master this and find the right spots for this, it can deliver you something which is very unique.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, because I think the low-driven cross is more leading, like it pushes the player that you're crossing to forward to kind of come onto the ball. Whereas if you're doing a low-driven pass, then that's like basically goes direct to the player pretty much, not too much kind of leading. And also the other thing is that the low-driven cross, if it leads, it always leads towards the goal, whereas a low-driven doesn't. I say low-driven, it's just a driven pass. Driven pass it doesn't always lead in the right direction. So I think the low-driven cross can be really, really good. Josh, anything to add before we wrap up?
Yeah, I would say I will often try and utilize a curved through ball as well, especially if my winger has incisive. When like the thing that I think is different this year in terms of the crossing, or at least getting the ball in from the wings, if you want to do it, you have to do it early. If you wait until you see the pass, almost, it's too late, because they almost like the defenders do a bit of a quicker catch up. You have to like be ready to play it the moment you like break into the edge of the box and you see your striker make the run, because they stop that run so quickly. So you have to be able to play it early. I think the thing that the L1 R1 double tap cross gives you is some curve, which you tend not to get as much when you're just playing a normal pass, they don't tend to bend it as much, which is why I like the kind of forced curve through ball. And I think being able to mix it up as well changes the way that your opponent defends it. If you try and put it in early, they'll start trying to block you putting that pass across in early. And so even if it's maybe not there, it then alters the way that they're defending it. I don't know. I have found cutbacks quite difficult to execute this year once you get kind of along the byline in a way that I haven't struggled in previous years. There is a part of me that kind of like is a bit of careful what you wish for. I think if it was easy to do, I think the game would get back to like that wing bashing, run down the touchline and then pull it back in, which isn't a lot of fun. Obviously there's a lot of like people who'll be able to play a lock and pull a player into the right position to get the ball back to them, and that is helpful. But yeah, like I think the biggest thing when you get it on the wing is not worrying about recycling the ball. Sometimes the best thing you can do is actually turn back and just hold the ball and change the angle of attack, as TaZz saying. It gives your players more of a chance to make a good run and gives you more time to spot it, but also gives your opponent more chance to make a mistake with a second man press or pulling someone out of position defensively.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think just final thing to say is like, I think if you end up getting quite deep and pushing their defense back, then coming back round can often mean that you have an attacker in the box free that you can pass to from around the edge of the box, like not the side of the box. If you do that fairly quickly, and that can create a better opportunity than just literally playing one pass. So I think, which they're obviously going to be anticipating. So I think that is a really good point as well. Some really great points throughout the podcast, and I think on that we are ready to wrap up. So yeah, if you want to catch this week's content episode, I guess the final one of the Scream era, right? For the return of Scream, then you can catch that on the Patreon, which you can access just by searching support for weekly or following the link in the description. It's just £3 a month and you get double the podcast episodes. That's an extra episode every single week. And yeah, you'll be supporting the podcast and keeping it going. Right. So thank you very much to TaZz for joining us on this one. Always good to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
Been good. And thank you very much as well to Josh. Been good to have you too.
Yeah, me and TaZz will kiss and make up over our disagreements on keep moving after this as well.
Yeah.
If you're ready to apologize. No problem.
Yeah. Well, we'll find out when they completely remove it from the game, I guess, the next couple of weeks. We shall see. But yeah, thank you very much to all you listeners tuning in. If you're catching this on YouTube, drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe, of course, via all the podcast platforms and on YouTube. And finally, thank you very much to all you supporters supporting the podcast and keeping it going, including to those icon patrons. Dave B, Darren W, Hugh J, Rob W, Josh R, Ralph, Brian, Michael B, Adam R, Make B, Michael H, Rob S, Michael K, Neil P, Jake S, Tom B, Alex M, Damon H, L, James B, Sam K, The Shirt Locker, Lee A, Chris G, Mark M, Dom P, Rob P, Roger D, Waterman, Also Ran, and Juicy. Plus a special thanks to Luke M, Dave B, Hugh J, Tom M, Darren W, and Pato Foot for advice and production assistance. Before I leave you, just one more thing to add though. Ultimate Team is a bit like life really. It has its many ups and downs. If you're having a few more downs than ups in real life in these more difficult times, then please don't feel that you're alone or need to struggle on without taking action. If you go to thecalmzone.net, there's loads of resources, advice, support, or even just a friendly chat for anyone who needs it. If it sounds like it could help you, then head over to thecalmzone.net. And for now, have a good one, and I'll catch you on the next podcast.